I was already in the elevator, watching the numbers climb, when my phone buzzed against my palm. The building smelled like leather and cold air conditioning, that particular brand of downtown professional stillness that makes you feel like everything important in the world happens behind glass doors. I was wearing the navy blazer my father bought me 2 Christmases ago, the one he said made me look like someone who knew what she was doing. I had my bag over one shoulder. My copies of the shareholder agreement were printed, tabbed, and sorted. I was ready. I had been ready for this moment since the day my father's will was read 11 months ago. Then the buzz. I looked down at the screen. It was Patricia, my father's accountant. She had been managing Callaway Construction's books for 19 years, longer than I had been alive. She did not text me casually. She did not text me ever. The message was 3 lines. Sarah, do not sign anything today. I found something last night. Call me the second you get this. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor. I stood there while a man in a gray suit stepped around me and walked out without a second glance. The doors started to close. I put my hand out and stopped them. I stepped back into the elevator and pressed L for lobby. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. What I felt was not fear exactly. It was something colder and more precise, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. I pressed Patricia's name and put the phone to my ear before the elevator had descended 3 floors. She picked up on the first ring. Sarah, thank God. Her voice was low, urgent, the kind of controlled panic that comes from someone who has been sitting on information since 3 in the morning and hasn't slept. How close are you to the conference room? I'm in the elevator going back down, I said. Tell me. The shares document your brother sent over for today's signing, the one transferring 49% to his holding company in exchange for the operational buyout. She paused, and in that pause I could hear her pulling up something on her screen. There's a clause on page 31, section 12, subsection C. It's written in the kind of language that looks like standard indemnification language. It isn't. If you sign that document, Sarah, you don't just sell him the 49%. You trigger an automatic transfer of voting rights on your remaining 51% to his holding company's board for a period of, and I quote, no less than 36 calendar months during the operational transition period. I stared at the elevator doors. You become a silent partner, she continued, in your own majority stake. He controls everything for 3 years. In 3 years, you know what happens. I knew what happened. I had been watching it for 11 months. The company my father had built from a 2-truck operation in rural Georgia into a $40 million regional construction firm would belong, in every practical sense, to my brother Marcus and his 2 college friends who called themselves a holding company. My 51% would be a decoration, a frame with no painting inside. Patricia, I said carefully, how did this get past the attorneys? Because the attorneys are Vance and Dumont, she said, and Marcus's best friend from college is Daniel Dumont. The lobby doors opened. I walked out into the marble atrium and sat down on a bench near the fountain and did not say anything for a long moment. Before I tell you what Marcus had planned for that conference room on the 14th floor, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below. Have you ever trusted someone your whole life, someone you grew up with, someone who cried at your father's funeral standing right beside you, and then looked back and realized the grief on their face was just arithmetic? Just them calculating what they were about to inherit? Because I need to know I'm not the only one. Here's what I knew about my brother before that morning. Marcus was 7 years older than me. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike in our grandmother's driveway. He was the one who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to sit with me in a hospital waiting room when I had my appendix out at 22. He called me every Sunday for years, not for any reason, just to call. When our father got sick the first time, Marcus was the one who flew home immediately, who sat with Dad through the chemo appointments, who reorganized his own life around the illness without being asked. I had loved my brother with the specific, uncomplicated certainty that comes from never having had any real reason not to. What I did not know until Patricia's call was how long he had been building this. Our father's will split Callaway Construction in half. 51% to me, the younger one, because Dad had always said Marcus had enough opportunity and I had enough talent, and he wanted to protect both things. He gave Marcus 49%. He gave me the controlling stake and a letter that said, Sarah, I am trusting you to hold this together. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not ready. Marcus had been gracious at the reading. He hugged me. He said he was proud of Dad for seeing what he saw in me. He said we were going to build something extraordinary together. I believed him. For 11 months, I believed him. But Patricia had been watching the books. And 3 weeks after the funeral, before I had even moved my things into the main office, Marcus had incorporated a holding company in Delaware called Crest Bridge Consulting LLC. He had filed the paperwork on a Tuesday morning. between the funeral and the first board meeting. He had begun drafting the acquisition language 6 days after our father was buried. He was not mourning. He was building the case. I sat in that lobby for 6 minutes. I let the fountain run, and I let the realization move through me the way cold water moves through a room, slow and total. I thought about the last 11 months. The things that had seemed like adjustments and growing pains now rearranged themselves into something deliberate. The way he had insisted on handling all external vendor negotiations to take the pressure off me while I was settling in. The way the company credit accounts had been restructured without my sign-off, which Marcus explained as routine administrative updates from the operations side. The way my father's longtime site managers had one by one taken quiet early retirements with generous packages that Marcus had arranged personally, replacing them with men I didn't know who reported, as far as I could tell, only to Marcus. The way the company's central email system had been migrated to a new platform last spring, and somehow my access credentials to 3 key vendor contracts had failed to transfer correctly, and Marcus had offered to just handle those accounts directly until IT resolved the problem. IT had never resolved the problem. He had been dismantling my operational authority one small piece at a time, so carefully and so slowly that each piece looked like nothing, a small technical inconvenience, a helpful gesture, a temporary accommodation. He had been farming the company out from under me while I thanked him for his help. I didn't feel betrayal. I had moved past that in the elevator. What I felt now was the cold precision of someone who understands exactly what is happening and is already calculating the response. I called Patricia back. "I'm not leaving," I said. A pause. "Sarah, if I walk out today," he resets. He files a revised document next week, or he calls an emergency board session, or he finds another angle. He has been doing this for 11 months, and he will not stop because I canceled one meeting. I kept my voice level. "I need to go upstairs and I need to end this today." But not as the person he wrote the script for. "What do you need from me?" Patricia asked. No hesitation. "The full audit," I said. "Everything you found. Vendor contracts, the email migration records, the early retirement packages, the Delaware incorporation date. Can you send it to my phone as a PDF right now?" "I've had it ready since 4 this morning," she said. My phone buzzed with an incoming file while she was still talking. My next call was to my own attorney. Not Vance and Dumont, mine. A woman named Carol Reyes, who my father had always described as the person you call when you are genuinely in trouble, not the person you call when you want to feel reassured. I had Carol's number in my phone since the day the will was read because my father had told me to put it there. He had said, "If Marcus ever stops calling you on Sundays, call Carol." Marcus had stopped calling on Sundays 4 months ago. Carol answered on the second ring. I told her everything in 4 minutes. She was quiet for most of it, and when I finished, she asked 2 questions. The first was whether I had received any copies of the signing document in advance. I had. The second was whether I had signed anything at all since the original probate filing. I had not. "Go upstairs," she said. "Don't sign the document. Don't let them pressure you. If they produce a new version you haven't seen before, you are legally entitled to adjourn any signing meeting to allow time for independent review. They cannot compel you. I will be there in 45 minutes. The meeting starts in 12, I said. Then stall, she said. You're the majority shareholder, Sarah. The meeting doesn't begin until you say it does. I straightened my jacket in the lobby mirror. I did not look like someone whose brother had spent 11 months quietly engineering her erasure from her own inheritance. I looked like my father's daughter walking into a boardroom. I took the elevator back up to 14. Marcus was already in the conference room when I walked in. He was standing near the window, the city spread out behind him, talking in a low voice to Daniel Dumont, and a third man I didn't recognize who was introduced to me as a notary. There was a tray of coffee in the center of the table. There was a thick document bound in a blue cover sitting at my chair. There were 2 pens laid out beside it, with the precision of something that had been arranged many times in someone's imagination before it was arranged in reality. Marcus turned when I came in and his face did exactly what I expected it to do. It became warm. It became the face of my brother who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm. It became the face of the man who cried at our father's funeral, Sarah. He crossed the room and hugged me, and his arms felt the same as they always had, and I let myself feel that for exactly 1 second before I filed it away. I'm so glad you're here. I know this has been a long road. After today it gets easier, I promise. I sat down. I put my bag on the table. I did not touch the blue-bound document. I want to wait for Carol, I said pleasantly. Something moved across Marcus's face. A tightening around the eyes, almost imperceptible. Daniel Dumont looked up from his phone. Carol Reyes? Marcus said. I didn't realize you were bringing outside counsel. This is just a formality, Sarah. We've been over every line of this together. I know, I said. She won't be long. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees without the thermostat changing. Marcus sat down across from me. He picked up his coffee. His movements were controlled and careful, the way a person moves when they are recalculating. While we wait, he said, do you have any questions about the document? I want to make sure you feel completely comfortable before we proceed. Page 31, I said. Section 12, subsection C. A silence. It was not a long silence. Marcus was too skilled for that. He recovered in under 2 seconds, which told me he had thought about the possibility of someone finding Section 12 and had prepared for it. That preparation, the speed of it, told me more about the last 11 months than anything Patricia had found. The transition language, he said, nodding slowly, as if remembering a minor detail. That's actually there to protect you, Sarah. During the operational transition, it prevents either party from making unilateral decisions that could destabilize. It removes my voting rights for 36 months, I said. It creates a shared governance framework. Marcus. I said his name the way our father used to say it when Marcus was 17 and trying to explain away something obvious. Stop. He stopped. Daniel Dumont was very still. The notary looked at his phone. I reached into my bag and placed Carol's preliminary legal brief on the table. I had printed it downstairs at the building's business center while waiting for the elevator. Patricia's audit summary went beside it. I smoothed both documents flat with my hand and left them there between us like a pair of cards laid face up. Patricia found the Delaware Incorporation, I said. 6 days after Dad's funeral, Marcus. 6 days. Something shifted in his face. The warmth did not disappear exactly. It became something else. Something underneath the warmth that had always been there. And I understood with a specific and permanent sadness that this was the true face, and the brother who called me on Sundays had been the performance. You were always going to do this, I said. Not an accusation, just a fact being spoken aloud for the first time. The whole year. The vendors, the email migration, the site managers. You were building a company I didn't actually control, and waiting for me to sign the piece of paper that made it legal. Sarah, his voice had changed. The warmth was entirely gone now. What replaced it was something I had never heard from him before. Something flat and businesslike that sounded like a stranger wearing my brother's face. Dad made a mistake. You know he made a mistake. You're 28 years old. You have never run a company. I have been managing Callaway's operations for 6 years. The workforce knows me. The vendors know me. I built the relationships that kept this company solvent through 2 recessions while you were finishing your master's degree. What he did to you wasn't a gift. It was a liability. He saddled you with something you cannot handle because he felt guilty for not paying enough attention to you when you were a kid. I let him finish. The room was very quiet. I want you to listen to yourself, I said. You just told me Dad gave me the controlling stake out of guilt, and your solution to that injustice is to take it from me through a 36-month voting rights suspension, buried in Section 12 of a document drafted by your college friend. I tilted my head slightly. How is that different from what you're accusing him of? Marcus's jaw tightened. I built this company with him, he said quietly. I was there. You weren't. I know, I said, and I meant it, and I am genuinely sorry that it didn't feel like enough, but I am not signing this document. The elevator opened down the hall, and Carol Reyes walked through the glass door in a gray wool coat with a leather briefcase, and the kind of calm that fills a room the way water fills a container, completely, immediately, leaving no empty space. She did not introduce herself to Marcus or Daniel Dumont. She sat down beside me, opened her briefcase, and placed her own copy of the signing document on the table, with several pages flagged in yellow. Before we proceed, she said to the room, I'd like to address the enforceability of Section 12, subsection C, under Georgia corporate law, and also the question of Mr. Callaway's fiduciary responsibility as minority shareholder to the majority shareholder during the period in which he was unilaterally restructuring operational controls without board approval. Daniel Dumont's pen stopped moving. Carol continued without looking up from her notes. She had the specific quiet authority of someone who has won cases and doesn't feel the need to perform winning. She laid out in 12 minutes exactly what Marcus had done, exactly why it was legally actionable, and exactly what it would cost him to contest it. When she finished, she closed her folder and looked across the table at Marcus with the same expression she might use to discuss the weather. My client is prepared to offer you a revised operational agreement with clearly defined roles, a fair market rate for your continued management services, and a performance-based equity option that can earn you up to an additional 9% over 5 years, she said. The alternative is that we file a formal complaint with the Georgia Secretary of State regarding the unauthorized restructuring of operational controls, at which point Crest Bridge Consulting LLC becomes part of a public record that your future business partners will be able to Google. Marcus sat very still. The city moved behind him through the window, indifferent and continuous. He looked at me once more. I don't know what he was looking for. Maybe the version of me he had built the plan around, the one who didn't know about Patricia, the one who hadn't saved Carol's number in her phone, the one who would walk into a room and sign whatever she was given because she trusted her brother. That version of me had existed. She had been real. She had loved him and believed in him and called him crying the night our father was diagnosed and felt his arms around her through the phone. She had also grown up. "I need a few minutes," Marcus said. "Of course," Carol said. "We'll wait." He left the room with Daniel Dumont. The notary looked at the ceiling. I poured myself coffee from the tray and drank it slowly and watched the city outside the window and thought about my father's letter, which I kept in the top drawer of my desk at the office. "Don't let anyone tell you that you're not ready." I had not been ready 11 months ago. I knew that clearly and without shame. I had walked into an inherited company I didn't fully understand, surrounded by people whose loyalties I couldn't map, carrying a title that came with more complexity than I had prepared for. I had needed Marcus's knowledge of the operations, and I had been grateful for it, and I had trusted him with an openness that he had leveraged with extraordinary patience and precision. But ready is not a state you arrive at. It's a thing you build while you're doing the work. And for 11 months, even while I was being slowly boxed out, I had been doing the work. I had learned the vendor contracts. I had studied the financials. I had built relationships with the project managers that Marcus thought he had permanently redirected. I had read every document that came through the company with the kind of attention my father had always told me was my strongest quality. He had bet on the version of me from the beginning of the year. He had not noticed me becoming something else. Marcus came back 22 minutes later. Daniel Dumont stayed in the hallway. He sat down. He did not look at the document. He looked at me with the specific exhaustion of someone who has run a very long race and arrived at the finish line to find the tape has been moved. "I want the management services agreement reviewed by my own attorney before I sign anything," he said. "Reasonable," Carol said. She produced a revised term sheet from her briefcase, which told me she had drafted it before she walked into the building. "We suggest a 7-day review period." Marcus picked it up. He read it. He set it down. "The 9% equity option," he said. "The performance benchmarks. Who sets them?" "The board," I said, "which currently consists of you, me, and Patricia Kim as the independent director our father appointed before he died." He was quiet for a moment. "Patricia," he said. "Patricia," I confirmed. He exhaled. It was a long breath, the kind that carries something out of the body that won't be coming back. He picked up the term sheet and folded it once and put it in his jacket pocket. He looked at me, and for a single unguarded moment, I saw my actual brother, the one underneath the calculation, the one who was 7 years older and had not been given what he felt he had earned, and who had handled that injustice by becoming someone neither of us would have recognized 10 years ago. "I did love him," Marcus said. "I want you to know that. Whatever else." "I know," I said. "I did too." He stood up. He nodded once at Carol, not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. He walked to the door and paused. "The site managers," he said, not turning around. "Jenkins and Reyes out of the Savannah office. I can get them to come back if you want. They're good." "I know they're good," I said. "That's why you moved them." He left. The notary packed up his things very quickly and followed without speaking. Carol and I sat alone in the conference room for a moment with the untouched blue-bound document between us on the table. "You want to keep that?" she asked, nodding at it. "No," I said. She picked it up and dropped it into her briefcase and closed the clasp with a clean double click. I called Patricia from the elevator. "It's done," I said. She exhaled so hard I could hear it through the phone. "Are you okay?" I thought about the question. The honest answer was complicated. I was okay in the way that you are okay after surgery, when the thing that was wrong has been correctly addressed and you are already healing, but the place where the incision was made still understands what happened to it. "I will be," I said. That evening, I drove out to the job site on Route 9, the one that had been my father's last major project before he got sick. The framing was mostly complete. The skeleton of what would eventually be a mixed-use building stood against the Georgia sky, and a few of the crew guys were still there wrapping up for the day, and one of them recognized me and raised a hand, and I raised one back. I stood at the chain-link fence for a long time and thought about my father. I thought about the fact that he had known. Not everything, maybe, but enough. He had put Carol's number in my phone. He had put 51% in my name while my brother was standing in the room. He had written me a letter that said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you're not ready rather than you are ready," because he understood the difference between a fact and a process. He had handed me a fight disguised as an inheritance and trusted me to figure it out. 2 weeks later, Jenkins and Reyes came back to the Savannah office. Patricia became a permanent independent board member with a formal charter. Marcus signed the management services agreement and for the first 8 months honored every term of it with the precise professional competence that had always been his genuine gift, whatever else was layered on top of it. We did not have Sunday calls. We had scheduled Tuesday check-ins about operations, and they were productive and correct, and they were also the only thing between us now, and I had made my peace with that. Some losses you carry. You don't pretend they didn't happen. You don't forgive them in the bright, easy way that people who haven't experienced them suggest you should. You learn to build something real around the shape of what's gone, and you make sure the foundation is yours this time, held in your name, controlled by your vote, protected by someone who picks up the phone when you call. Callaway Construction turned a 14% profit in the first fiscal year under the new structure. It was the strongest year in a decade. My father's letter still lives in the top drawer of my desk. I don't need to read it anymore. I have it memorized. But sometimes at the end of a long day, I open the drawer anyway just to see his handwriting, just to let the shape of his words sit in the room with me for a moment. He was right, I think. About most things. He was right about me.